Welcome to Math 104, Introduction to Probability. These videos are presented for the first time as part of a hybrid section in spring 2016. I'm Michael Weingart. What is a course in probability about? Well, it's about something very practical, and you will never doubt while taking this course this actually has to do with real life. It is, in a word, about the systematic study of uncertainty and about the decisions that we make in the face of that uncertainty. There are aspects of uncertainty throughout our lives, so this really is quite concrete and quite practical. To give just a mundane example, when you leave your home today, there is some chance of rain. Maybe specifically a 30% chance of rain. That is a specific number that could appear in the forecast, and if the forecast says 30% chance of rain, it means something different than if it said 50% chance of rain, or 100% chance of rain. Why does this matter? Well, it has practical consequences. It has practical consequences for the decisions that you make about, for example, whether to go to an outdoor concert or to some other outdoor activity. Here's another example. When you drive a car, there is a certain chance of having an automobile accident. Every time you get behind the wheel of a car, there is this possibility. We can look deeper and ask, what is the probability of a small accident, meaning less than $500? That's a question. How likely is that? We can ask, what is the likelihood of a large accident, say greater than $10,000? That is another possibility. Now, why does this matter? What is the practical consequence? The insurance company has to ask the following question: what does it cost to insure you as a driver? In order to answer that question, which the insurance company needs to do to set the insurance rates, it has to work with the probabilities involved here in accidents small and large and all the range in between. Now, you might not think very carefully about these likelihoods and damage amounts each time you turn the key in the ignition, but the insurance companies do, and they work with probabilities to compute the insurance rates. One of the things that you will appreciate by the end of this course is what goes into this computation and why the computation makes sense. Here's another example. Suppose you hear a sports commentator, say that the next time Rutgers plays Ohio State, the odds will be 5-2 against Rutgers. That is a very specific statement about how likely it is for Rutgers to win, and that likelihood is measured in a specific way. We can ask, what exactly does this statement mean? And we can also think about whether we think this statement is true. A sports commentator can make a statement like this. We might think that that commentator's assessment is unreasonably favorable to Rutgers or unreasonably unfavorable. Another question, another example of uncertainty in life. Should you play the lottery? There is uncertainty about whether you will win. And in light of that uncertainty, we can ask, how large should the jackpot be in order for it to be worth it to you to play? Which, by the way, is very rarely the case. In fact, one of the goals of this course is to convince you not to play the lottery. Another real-life question. There are uncertainties in whether you will contract a certain disease during your lifetime, but just as importantly for you to understand, when you are tested, there are uncertainties about whether the test is correct. You can ask, if you test positive for the disease, that means that the test says yes, you have it, is the test correct? Do you really have the disease? And this may be surprising, but the answer is maybe not. In other words, the test can be incorrect. There are two ways that it could be incorrect. It could give you a false positive. That means that it could be incorrect by falsely telling you that you do have the disease when you actually don't have it. Or you could get a false negative. It could falsely say, no, you don't have the disease, when in fact you do have it. How likely is it for the test to give false results of one kind or the other? And what does this mean for your healthcare decision-making? Understanding this is an important goal of the course, and probability theory, at the level you will learn it, sheds a great deal of light. You will need to make healthcare decisions at some point in your life, whether for yourself or for others, and to make well-informed decisions, understanding the math is crucial. One more example before we really plunge in. Suppose you read in a political poll that 60% of the American voters support a certain presidential candidate. Maybe the poll is correct and maybe the poll is incorrect. Look, just because the poll appears on a website, even if it's the work of a distinguished professional pollster, does not guarantee that it's correct. So this is the statement: 60% of the voters support so-and-so. Now, it is possible that the poll has gotten it exactly right, and it really is the case that 60% of the voters do support that candidate. But there is also some possibility that the poll has gotten it wrong, and the true number is 70%. So what if the true number of voters supporting this candidate is 70% of them? Well, that could happen. How could it happen? Well, it's always possible for a pollster to have bad luck and to just happen to pick a group of voters to talk to who are not representative of the voting population at large. There are other ways that pollsters can mess up, but this possibility of bad luck is always there. Now, how likely is it that the poll could be so badly mistaken just by chance? Now that's a question for a probability course, and by the end of the course, you will be able to answer this question and to understand the thought process behind it. What exactly do we mean by probability, or the question, what is the probability that such and such event occurs? It would be cheating just to replace the word probability by the word likelihood. Because then you could ask, okay, what do you mean by likelihood? Similarly, for other expressions that are just replacements for the word probability. This is a familiar everyday idea, but that doesn't make it easy to define. Just to pin down what we mean by probability and make the idea precise, we'll need to have a new insight. Please go on to the next video.